أنت ربي ذو الجلال والإكرام يا إلهي.
والصلاة والسلام على رسول الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. So, Bismillah, we're continuing our 40 ahadith, and we've gone through and pretty much picked out all the ones that talk about Islam in a very general sense, very similar to how Rasulullah ﷺ defined Islam in the second hadith. And now we're going to focus on the ahadith that deal more with the topic of Iman, belief, and the issues that deal with the metaphysical, the unseen realm, alimul ghaib, and things that are hard to kind of understand in a logistical sense. There are several ahadith, there's about 12 to 14 hadith that we'll cover that deal with this, especially in the way that Rasulullah ﷺ described it in the second hadith. And so today we're going to do hadith number 4 and 10. And they both deal with Iman, they both deal with alimul ghaib, the unseen realm, and they both deal with dua. So we'll start with the fourth hadith, and it's narrated by Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, where he says, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وهو الصادق المصدوق. It's kind of a unique way of starting the hadith. Abdullah bin Mas'ud says that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says, and he is the truthful and the one whose truth has been confirmed. It's interesting that he starts the hadith like this, you know. He is the truthful, reminding people that Rasulullah ﷺ is the truthful, and his truthfulness has been confirmed. Sadiq and Masduq. So, one of the reasons why he might be starting the hadith like this is because, especially at the time of the Arabs, at the time of Rasulullah ﷺ, he's talking about something that they have no knowledge about. And so this is something for them that is a bit of a scientific issue, maybe, but it's not something that they had any knowledge of. But it's also kind of a sign of the miraculousness of the hadith of Rasulullah ﷺ, in that no one at this time knew what he was about to talk about, which is the science of embryology, the stages through which a fetus kind of goes through its various stages of creation. And so he says that the Prophet Muhammad says, إِنَّ أَحَدَكُمْ يُجْمَعُ خَلْقُهُ فِي بَطْنِ أُمِّهِ 40 يوما نطفة ثم يكون علقة مثل ذلك ثم يكون مضغة مثل ذلك. Right? Any one of you is formed in the womb of his mother 40 days, he says that Rasulullah, and this is an issue, this is a point that we're going to have to come back to, the number of days, right? Because there is differences in interpretation here. 40 days as a drop of sperm, or as a fluid, a drop of fluid, right? ثُمَّ يَكُونُ عَلَقَةً مِثْلَ ذَلِكَ. Then he will be a leech-like structure. Alaqa in the Arabic language means something that hangs, clings, something that literally sucks, like a leech carries that same kind of connotation, right? And something that is kind of hanging on. So Rasulullah says, then he is an alaqa just like that. Okay? ثُمَّ يَكُونُ مُضْغَةً مِثْلَ ذَلِكَ. Then he is a mudgha just like that. A mudgha is like a chewed up lump of flesh, right? All of these terms are really interesting in terms of their accuracy from an embryological point of view. And these are the same terms that is actually used in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes 7 stages of creation, right? وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ سُلَالَةٍ مِنْ طِينٍ. We created mankind from the quintessence of clay. ثُمَّ جَعَلْنَاهُ نُطْفَةً فِي قَرَارٍ مَكِينٍ. Then we made him a nutfa, right? A drop of fluid in a safe place. This is really kind of the term, the Qarani Makin, a safe place, is a very accurate way to say what's going on here, because we know from an embryological point of view, the sperm, when it fertilizes, it actually implants in the side of the myometrium. It's a muscle lining of the uterus. And at this point, because the sperm is not from the mother, the immune system of the mother would recognize this as a foreign entity, and it would go after it and destroy it. but on the side of the uterus, that is the one place where it will not go after it and attack it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, qarari makin, right? In a safe, established, kind of like firm place, you know? Then he says, في قرار مكان ثم خلقنا النطفة علقة. Then we created from this nutfa an alaqa, a leech-like structure. And at this point, it looks exactly like that because it's clinging on to the side of the uterus, and it is sucking blood from the uterus, and that's how it's being sustained. And it's kind of hanging on. It's suspended, which is exactly what alaqa means. The terminology here is very accurate. And they had no way of knowing this at the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they didn't know any of this. They never studied this. They never, we're talking about something that is just centimeters big at this point, right? But the accuracy of which the stages is being described is very profound. ثم خلقنا النطفة علقة فخلقنا العلقة مضغة. Then from this alaqa we created a mudgha, which is the term used in this hadith. This ayah is from Surah Mu'minun. I think it's ayah number 5, if I'm not mistaken. Chapter number 23 in the Quran. And so from this alaqa, this leech-like structure, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we created a mudgha, which is a chewed up lump of flesh. It's interesting. What happens is, as this fertilized egg, this fetus begins to grow, something called apoptosis begins to happen, which is where parts of the fertilized egg, the fetus, begins to disintegrate and die, and other parts begin to grow. And it looks like cavities are forming along the back of it, right? These cavities look exactly like teeth marks, as if someone were to have bitten into it, right? Now the term mudgha is used, which means something that is chewed up, right? And what's actually happening along the back of the fetus is a spinal cord is forming, right? The neuroectoderm is forming. The components of the peripheral central nervous systems are beginning to form, and parts of it have to die, parts of it have to grow. It's called apoptosis and hypertrophy in order for that to happen. And that is only a few centimeters big, but it's described with significant linguistic accuracy here, right? ثم خلقنا العلقة مضغة فخلقنا المضغة عظاما فكسونا العظام لحما. From that we created bones, and then on top of the bones flesh. ثم أنشأناه خلقا آخر, and then we created from that another creation, right? So the person comes out, they're totally different. 7 different stages that are described in the Quran. This hadith mentions 4 of those 7 stages. Nutfa, right? Alaqa, mudgha. So he says mudgha مثل ثم يرسل إليه الملك فينفخ فيه الروح, and then an angel coming to him and breathing life into him. So that's like the khalqan akhar, right? The different creation. ويؤمر بأربع كلمات. So this angel comes to him and breathes life into him, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِ. This ruh, this is the life force that gives us life. It's a pure life force, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الرُّوحِ قُلِ الرُّوحُ مِنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّي وَمَا أُوتِيتُم مِنَ الْعِلْمِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. They ask you about the ruh. Say, this is from the command of Allah, and you have not been given any knowledge of the ruh. So the ruh is something that we don't know much about, but we know that at some point when our formation is occurring in the womb of the mother, an angel comes to us, right, and breathes this ruh into us, right, gives us this life. Now, let's stop for a moment before we talk about what the angel is commanded to decree for this fetus. And let's just talk about the days for a moment. The hadith says 40 days an alaqa, 40 days a nutfa, right, like a drop of fluid. 40 days a leech-like structure, 40 days a chewed up lump of flesh. Okay, how many days is that? 120 days. And then an angel is sent, right? Life begins at this point, right? From a scientific point of view, if you read the hadith like this, 40, 40, 40, there's a bit of a problem. Because if you look under ultrasound, if you look at what the fetus looks like, and you look at what the embryo looks like after 40 days, it doesn't look like a drop of fluid. It starts to look pretty formed. In fact, at 42 days, we can typically see a heartbeat. It just comes out of nowhere. Now, this is really interesting. All of a sudden, like this little lump of flesh, right? If you put an ultrasound on the stomach of a mother, you can see a heartbeat starting to form, right? And that typically happens at about 42 days or 6 weeks, okay? If we read this hadith literally, 40, 40, 40, it doesn't quite work from a scientific point of view. But there's another way to look at it. You can say, like that, مثل ذلك, مثل ذلك, مثل ذلك, is all components of the first 40 days. The Arabic language allows for that interpretation as well, right? And in that sense, it actually becomes very, very accurate. Because if you say that after 40 days, the angel is coming to breathe life into him, that actually corresponds with the first signs of heartbeat that we see. You know, and that would make sense. That would make sense that, you know, after 40 days, life is blown into that fetus, and all of a sudden a heartbeat begins to form. Because we know that heart, right, is very synonymous with a metaphysical idea of life, not just physical, but metaphysical life as well, right? So that's very significant. And we have another hadith to corroborate. So pausing on this hadith real quick and going to another hadith to corroborate, there is another hadith that is narrated in Muslim, where he says, Rasulullah says, إِذَا مَرَّ بِالنُّطْفَةِ 42 لَيْلَةً أو في رواية 47 ليلة. When 42 days passes, now this is another hadith, right? It's in Sahih Muslim. When 42 days passes, and in another narration, between 43 and 49 days, right? Or between 42 and 49 days, when that passes the fetus, بعث الله ملكا فصورها وخلق سمعها وبصرها وجلدها ولحمها وعظامها. Allah sends an angel, and that angel shapes this fetus, and it creates its hearing, it creates its vision, it creates its skin, it creates its flesh, it creates its bones. So the coming of the angel, and according to this hadith, and literally taking care of all of the life components of this fetus, in another hadith is occurring between 42 and 49 days, right? Now that's actually because that's the range at which we typically see a heart rate form under ultrasound, right? So coming back to the original hadith now, it makes much more sense corroborating with other ahadith from a textual point of view, and it also makes much more sense corroborating with scientific evidence from a contextual point of view, that the angel is likely sent at 40 days. And we know 40 is just a term in the Arabic language that sometimes could mean 41, 42, 43. This 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi actually contains 42 hadith, right? So that term 40 is flexible in the Arabic language as well. Now this raises some bioethical issues as well. What happens for an abortion before 40 days or after 40 days, right? Or before 120 days, after 120 days. The view in which you see this hadith, if you see life coming at 40 days or life coming at 120 days, it totally changes the hukum of abortion. Abortion is haram in general, but the severity of it increases after life, right? So it's haram mutlaqan. But the diya, the blood money that has to be paid, right, the compensation that has to be paid, or the punishment of it, before life and after life is, less and more, respectively. So if you take that opinion of 40 days, then after 40 days, the punishment for abortion is supposed to be even more than before. The only exception for abortion before 40 days is really if you know that child is not going to be a viable child. Through chromosomal testing, it doesn't have a chance at life. And after 40 days, that or if the mother's life is in danger, so the mother's life takes precedence over the fetus's life. And there are cases like in eclampsia or preeclampsia or some other, pregnancy conditions when it's known that if the mother continues with this birth, she most likely will die, right? And at that point, that is a rare exception for the permissibility of terminating or speeding up the birth, you know, even if that's at risk to the fetus, right? So coming back to the hadith now, this angel is tasked with writing 4 things, or determining 4 things for this fetus, right? بِكَتْبِ رِزْقِهِ وَأَجَلِهِ وَعَمَلِهِ وَشَقِيٌّ أَوْ سَعِيدٌ. بِكَتْبِ رِزْقِهِ, all of the risk that this child will have, right? The lifespan that this child will have, the actions, good and bad, that this child will have, right? And then whether this child will be shaqiyun aw sa'idun. Shaqi is miserable, sa'id is happy. But not just miserable and happy in this life, hellfire or paradise. That's ultimately what it means, right? Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ سُعِدُوا فَفِي الْجَنَّةِ خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا. Those who are happy will be in paradise forever, right? The same term is used there, okay? So these 4 things are written. And this is the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? We believe in the qadr. We believe in predestination. We believe that these things were written beforehand, right? And that every single action that we do, every single penny that we earn, every single second that we live or don't live has been predestined, right? And there is nothing that can be done about that destiny, correct? Now this causes a bit of a confusion from a, you know, kind of a psychological or psycho-spiritual point of view, right? In that if everything has been written for me, why should I even try? Why should I even, you know, make an effort? You know, it's all gonna happen anyway. And they asked this to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you know. They said, you know, why should we even try? Ya Rasulullah, أَفَلَا نَمْكُثُ عَلَى كِتَابِنَا وَنَدَعَ الْعَمَلِ. Should we not just sit back and let our destiny kind of unfold, you know, and leave action? And Rasulullah said, "I'malu فَكُلٌّ مُيَسَّرٌ لِمَا خُلِقَ لَهُ." No, do action, because everyone will be facilitated for that which they were created for, right? أما أهل السعادة فييسرون لعمل أهل السعادة وأما أهل الشقاوة فييسرون لعمل أهل الشقاوة. People of happiness, meaning paradise, the path of paradise will unfold for them eventually, right? As you act, that path will unfold for you, right? And as you try, that path will continue to unfold for you. And the people of hellfire, right? The path will continue to unfold for them as well. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you know, kind of addresses this question by saying, look, things are written, but that is separate from the fact that you have to seek what is good, avoid what is evil, and still do your best. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, numerous times in the Quran, numerous times in the Hadith, we're told to do our best, right? فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَسْتَطَعْتُمْ, the ayah. Have taqwa of Allah to what? To the best of your ability, right? Someone who's doing their best is not just sitting back waiting for what? Predestination, right? And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says in another hadith, which we've already covered in this book, مَا أَمَرْتُكُمْ بِهِ فَأْتُوا مِنْهُ مَسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Whatever I've told you to do it to what? To the best of your ability, right? So someone who's doing their best is not just sitting back and relaxing, right? Not just sitting back and waiting for their actions to kind of just unfold according to destiny, right? That's a trick that shaitan will do, and that's a way in which shaitan will get you to be lazy or not to do what you're supposed to be doing. So there's another point that arises here though. There's an authentic hadith in which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, لا يرد القدر إلا الدعاء ولا يزيد في العمر إلا البر. Right? وَإِنَّ الرَّجُلَ لَيُحْرِمَ رِزْقَهُ بِذَنْبٍ يُصِيبُهُ. Now listen to these 3 things. This is another authentic hadith. Do we have a contradiction? Right? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, nothing can turn away qadr, destination, predestination. Nothing can turn it away, right? Except what? Dua. Right? Okay, now wait a minute. I thought things were written. Are you telling me that there's a way to change what's written, right? And he says, nothing increases lifespan other than piety. Wait a minute, we just said, بِكَتْبِ أَجَلِهِ, the amount of time that he lives has been written. So But Rasulullah is saying in this other hadith, nothing increases lifespan other than what? Piety, right? And then he says, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, وَإِنَّ رَجُلًا لَا يُحْرِمَ رِزْقَهُ بِذَنْبٍ يُصِيبُهُ, right? A man's rizq could be withheld from him because of a sin he committed. Wait a minute, we just said that angel, right, as that child is forming, and as the angel breathes or injects that ruh into him, the rizq has been written. Every single penny that you've ever earned, right? And rizq is general, right? Rizq it can be emotional. Rizq can be, it can be physical, like a morsel of food. It can be looked at in terms of calories, right? Rizq can be looked at in terms of money. Rizq can be looked at in terms of a lot of different things. Now here Rasulullah is saying, وَإِنَّ رَجُلًا لَا يُحْرِمَ رِزْقَهُ بِذَنْبٍ يُصِيبُهُ. A man, rizq can be withheld, right? Even though in this hadith it's saying it's written. And we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His decree has to be realized, right? So how do we understand these different hadith from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Is there a contradiction here? Of course not. Of course there is no contradiction. One of the ways to understand this is that part of the qadar, right? Part of the qadar is that you would have made dua, and in this dua, right, you will have added to your qadr. That was the original qadr, all right? And that your life would be increased, and the means through which it would have been increased is through good actions. And that part of your rizq would have been withheld, and because of a sin, it was withheld, and that was the original qadr. So that's the original qadr, right? The qadr is that you will make dua, and that things will change. And so there's no contradiction in that sense. But there's another way to look at it. You can look at this in terms of quantity and quality, okay? So looking at, for example, rizq, okay, or umr. Nothing increases lifespan other than piety, right? It could be that piety puts barakah in your life. And if a person was destined to live 33 years, okay, 11 months, 3 weeks, 4 days, 23 hours, and 22 seconds, all right? They're not going to live 24 seconds. They're not going to live 22 seconds, right? It's going to be 23 and the soul goes, okay? But in those 33 years, because they were pious, there will be barakah to the extent that their life felt fulfilled more. And they were able to do more. They were able to do in that 33 years what someone would need 70 years to do, right? So they were able to do more, and that's the idea of barakah. Barakah, تعريف البركة إذا أحل في قليل كثر وإذا أحل في كثير نفع. This is the definition of barakah. When barakah enters into something that's a small amount, it makes it a large amount. When it enters into something that is already a large amount, it makes it useful and beneficial, right? Because you could have something that's a lot but not useful. You could have something that's useful but small but not a lot, right? So that's the idea of barakah. So increase is in quality, not necessarily in quantity, right? The quantity cannot be changed, but the quality can definitely be changed, right? And the other way to look at rizq is just like that as well, right? The rizq, the quality of the rizq, right? And the substance of the rizq can be altered, but not necessarily the amount per se. That's another way of looking at it. Ibn Qayyim al-Jawzi, when he talks about this hadith, he spends some time talking about this hadith in one of his books. He says that there's 3 things that can happen when you make dua. If Allah has predestined something evil to happen for you, there's 3 things that can happen. 1, your dua will be stronger than the thing that has been destined, right? And the analogy of this is the analogy of a strong dua. Actually, let's wait till the second hadith to talk about that, because it's going to be more relevant in the next hadith we talk about. But he says, 1, your dua is stronger than the qadar, okay? And it repels the qadar. 2, the qadar is stronger than your dua, right? And it still comes down, but maybe it's just lessened to a little bit, right? Like the dua took something, like it made it less intense, right? And two, or three, they're of the same strength, and therefore they just repel each other, right? And so that's how Ibn Qayyim kind of looked at it. So qadar is something that is difficult to understand. It's difficult to wrap our minds around, but ultimately we don't have to understand it. We don't have to have a full grasp over it. It's not something that's intellectual. It's not something that's rational. It's not something that can be tested. We don't have to apply empirical scientific attitudes and cultures to things that are metaphysical. Ultimately, what we have to do is submit. Just like he says in the second hadith, وَتُؤْمِنَ بِالْقَدَرِ خَيْرِهِ وَشَرِّهِ. Right? In Imam Tahawi, he says in his Aqidah Tahawiyya, خَلَقَ الْخَلْقَ بِعِلْمِهِ. Right? He created the creation according to his knowledge. Right? And then he وَضَرَبَ الْآجَالِ. He set all of the times that people are going to live, right? And he predestined all of the destination. And we believe in all of that. And then what he says after this in the Hadith sallallahu alayhi wasallam is something that helps us understand this. An example that helps us understand this, right? And he says, إِنَّ أَحَدَكُمْ لَا يَعْمَلُ بِعَمَلِ أَهْلِ الْجَنَّةِ. He says, look, any one of you could, on the outside, do actions and live a life that is the life of a person of paradise, right? Meaning they're very pious. They do all kinds of good deeds. They give charity, they read Quran, they memorize, they do this, they do that, right? حَتَّى مَا يَكُونَ بَيْنَهُ وَبَيْنَهَا إِلَّا ذِرَاعًا, right? Until there is nothing but a handspan's length between this person and paradise. They live their whole life acting as a person of paradise until it comes to a handspan's length. There's nothing between this person and paradise except this right here, right? فَيَسْبِقُ عَلَيْهِ الْكِتَابِ. Then this kitab that the angel wrote for him in this moment of creation in the womb of the mother, right? Maybe it was 100 years before, okay? Maybe it was 30 years before, however long his time or her time span is, right? This kitab overcomes this individual, right? فَيَعْمَلُ بِعَمَلِ أَهْلِ النَّارِ فَيَدْخُلُهَا. Right? Then he begins to act according to the people of hellfire, and eventually he'll enter hellfire. That will be the last thing that he does, or she does, and they will enter hellfire. Right? This is why Rasulullah says, إِنَّ الْأَعْمَالُ بِالْخَوَاتِيمِ. Right? Actions are by their end. The way in which you end something essentially defines that action. Right? And if your life ended in an impious manner, that's how your life will be defined. And that's how you'll be resurrected as well. You'll be resurrected in the way in which you were performing your last action. So then he says, وَإِنَّ أَحَدَكُمْ لَيَعْمَلُ بِعَمَلِ أَهْلِ النَّارِ. Right? حتى ما يكون بينها وبينها إلا ذراعا. And any one of you will act according to the people of hellfire. Their entire life they will be impious, stealing, lying, not praying, not really doing good, selfish, whatever, this, that, or the other. Nothing but a handspan length will be between them and hellfire. And then فَيَسْبِقُ عَلَيْهِ الْكِتَابِ. Right? Predestination will overcome that person. Right? فَيَعْمَلُ بِعَمَلِ أَهْلِ الْجَنَّةِ فَيَدْخُلَهَا. And then, they will act according to the people of paradise. And finally, they will enter paradise. Now that's an example of how qadar works and how you cannot escape predestination, right? It also teaches us a couple other things. Number one, we can't judge anyone, right? You can't look at anyone and say, that person's going to hell. You cannot do that. That's haram, absolutely haram as a Muslim to say that, because you don't know what the khawatim are. You don't know what the end is for that person, right? If you were in Mecca in year 2, okay, and you were looking at Umar, radiallahu anhu, and how Umar is torturing Muslims, right? Or how Umar is, Umar buried one of his children, one of his daughters alive. And you're looking at that, right? And you're saying, at that time you might look at him, he must be a person of hellfire, right? But what is Umar's end? Umar's end is that he makes tawbah, right? And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevates his rank. And Allah makes him a khalifa. Allah makes him a confidant of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah gives him all kinds of noble attributes, right? And we know that Umar is one of the Ashar al-Mubashirin, one of the 10 people guaranteed paradise, right? So you cannot judge anyone, right? And then there are other people on the other end of the spectrum as well, right? The end is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We simply want good for people, right? I gave a talk one time at a joint MSA kind of like Christian Student Association event, right? And then, after the talk, we kind of sat at tables and we just kind of discussed different issues. And there was this very evangelical girl who wanted to talk to me, and she came up to me and said, Kia, I want to tell you something. I said, okay, what is it? I think you're going to hell. Just like that, okay? I said, I believe you're going to hell, right? She said, I think you're going to hell. And I said, you know what? It doesn't bother me if you think I'm going to hell, but it would bother me if you hope I go to hell. And she was just kind of, oh. She kind of did something like that. Because ultimately, it doesn't matter what you believe. The end is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And we don't know what the end is. And so, but what matters is what you hope for. That's ihsan, right? And we're going to get to another hadith eventually in which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه, right? None of you truly have Iman until they want or hope for their brother or sister what they want or hope for themselves. And actually, Imam Nawawi says about this very hadith, what you want or hope for your brother, this is your brother in humanity, not just your brother in Islam. This is your sister in humanity, not just your sister in Islam, right? So, we don't have to be worried about, believing that this specific person is going to hell and this specific person is going to paradise. We can believe in general that when people die, if they were pious and they believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will have mercy on them and admit them to paradise. We can believe in general that if people died on kufr and they were impious, right, Allah will be just with them and they will enter hellfire, right? But we don't have to believe that specifically about any one person because we don't know what that one person's end is. All we have to do to be people of Iman and Ihsan is hope. You could hope that everyone goes to paradise. You're allowed to hope that as a Muslim, right? عَرْضُهَا كَعَرْضِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ, right? There's plenty of room in paradise, right? There's plenty of room in paradise. Its width is the width of the heavens and the earth, right? If every human being, right, were to have entered paradise, it wouldn't reduce the space or feel congested in the least bit, right? So you're allowed to hope. In fact, you should hope that. And hoping that, wanting that, will change the way in which you act towards people. It will. You ever heard someone say, I hope you go to hell? You ever heard someone say that? Yeah, I hope you go to hell. How does that change how the person acts towards that other person? That he may want to kill him, right? He may want to torture him, may want to hit him, may want to hurt him, may want to beat him up, they definitely don't want some. That's why you should never hope hell for any, not even your worst enemy. You should never hope hell for, right? That word, I hope you go to hell. I mean, that should not even be in our vocabulary. Have you ever heard anything in Arabic language similar to that? In any context of hadith? أرجو أن تكون من الأهل النار. You never heard anything like that, So, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He make us people of ihsan and iman, and that He puts that hope in our heart. And that's the key to being a da'i. That's the key to being someone who is constantly calling to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is that no matter who a person is, right? Male, female, American, non-American, brown, white, black, green, orange, whatever, you hope good for them. You hope good for them. That's what you should have in your heart as a Muslim, even if they're not Muslim. Even if they're not Muslim. And good, ultimately, the best good is Iman. And that should be ultimately what is at the bottom of of everything. So,
What about people who are, openly they're, I guess you could say, enemies of Islam. They're insulting Islam and
yeah,
etc.
there were two Umars, the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Umar ibn al-Khattab, in the early years of Mecca. Both of them were torturing Muslims. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would make dua, "Oh Allah, guide one of the two Umars to Islam." So he was making dua, even though they were enemies of Islam. And we can still hope, like if they're openly enemies of Islam, we can hope that Allah guides them. We can hope that Allah, removes their animosity, and all of that is good. All of that is hoping good for them, because the more they have animosity towards Islam, the more they're harming themselves, So, in summary, the hadith encompasses points about belief, about embryology, about when life begins. There are some ahkam that can be derived from that in terms of abortion. Even like stem cell research is related to this, like when can you use stem cells, before a certain time period or not, judgmentality, deeds being by their end, predestination, all of these things are kind of encompassed by this. So let me pause here real quick. Is there any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I have actually one comment and two questions. So the comment, you said there were two Umars, so that, and one was the uncle. So when the Prophet ﷺ, he prayed for those two, one was Umar bin Ibn Khattab, which is the second Khalifa and all that. The other one is Amr bin Hisham, although it's written as Umru, Ain Mim Ra Wa, but it's Amr bin Hisham, and he was not the uncle.
Oh no, sorry, you're right. Yeah, you're
and
correct.
That's Abu Jahl.
Yeah. Sorry, it's Abu Jahl, not the uncle of Rasulullah. Not
So
Abu
that was Amr bin Hisham. So that was the comment.
That's correct.
So the two questions. First, when you said that Quran doesn't say that people will be in hellfire like that, but like Quran says.
Wait. What now? Quran doesn't say what?
That like when we were saying that like we should not say that should not say that we hope that person would go to hellfire or something.
Okay,
something like that.
Yeah.
But Quran specifically mentioned about munafiqeen that they will be in the lowest ditches. Yes. So although it's not our, as humans, we shouldn't say that this person is going to hell or heaven. It's not our right or place. It's Allah's decision.
Mm-hmm.
But Quran specifically said about some people that they are on that path and then they will be thrown in hellfire. So that appeared to be like what you were saying, that like Quran did say that.
Of
right?
course, we have to believe that. Yeah. That is a point of belief. People, munafiqun, people of kufr will go to hell. We do believe that.
Okay.
And that's a very important point of Iman. But what about, person A and person B? Do we know if they're going to be that in the end? Are they going to make tawbah before they die? We don't know that. So
we can't speak in specifics, but
generalities.
Generalities.
But we can speak in generality, right?
Yeah, because those the crime, what the munafiqeen did was like beyond anything else. No one else would be at that lower level, lowest level in hellfire other than munafiqeen, because their crime, they were given the era, they were given the company of the Prophet ﷺ, and yet they didn't like get the hadayah. So the other question, when you were saying that the 40 days and 40 plus 40, after 120 days the angel come according to the hadith, and then when you were saying that like in fact it could be just one era of 40 days,
one bulk of 40,
and then the angel comes, but we know scientifically that the sperm is not dead and the egg which comes from the mother is not dead. Both are living things, and then when they are merged together they form the embryo that is not dead. It's a live thing from the very beginning.
Yep.
So, and then as in Surah Hijr, ayah number 29, and Allah says that فَإِذَا سَوَيْتُهُ وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي. So that moment when Allah says that after when I was creating Adam alayhi salam, and I made him like his form, I corrupted his form, and then I said, then Allah says that
وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي.
وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي فَقَعُوا لَهُ سَاجِدِينَ. And then after then do the sajda when he was ordering the angels. So could it be that after 120 days the angels come and then they put the ruh in that? Because that is what I have heard, that because 120 days after that the angel comes, because when you say that it's alive, they bring life to that thing is alive from the very beginning, before they merge.
There's a difference between biological life and spiritual life, or ruhani, life that is ruhani. So we believe that a tree is alive, right? But there's no ruh. We don't believe that there's وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي in the tree. We don't believe that there's a nafs that comes out of the tree when it dies.
That's true. That I agree.
So there's biological life. The question is simply an Arabic question. It's a question of the Arabic language more than it is anything else. The hadith allows for two ways to look at the Arabic. One is it's all within one khabar of 40. The other is it's compiled. When you look at, there's other ahadith, it's not just this one. So that's the point. So there's another hadith that says 42 days. The angel comes at 42 days. And it's very specific, 42. There's another narration that says bid'a wa arba'in. Bid'a is between 3 and 9. So it allows for between 43, 49 days, right? Those are much more specific. And so, the first thing we do as Muslims when we interpret something is we look at other similar texts. The Quran interprets the Quran first, then Hadith interprets it. Other Hadith can help interpret other Ahadith. It is a valid way of looking at it, just to say 120 days. However, if you say that, from an embryological point of view as well, there's a problem because nutfa is a specific term. And you're saying that 40 days, it's a nutfa. Now, nutfa is a drop of fluid, okay? It has nothing to do with life. Embryologically speaking, it only looks like a drop of fluid for a couple days, It's at 40 days, it has a form that is very distinct, right? It looks like somites are on the spinal cord. It looks like it has paws that are beginning to form, and it looks like it has a heartbeat. So it doesn't look like a nutfa. And so that's the other thing, is that what we know from a scientific point, especially looking at ultrasound now, kind of makes one want to push it towards looking at it in terms of the other way, But you could still look at it, it doesn't affect your Iman in any way, because you're reading it simply as it is, But thank you for the correction, but Amr ibn Hisham.
Other quick question, about the abortion aspect was, so one of the only cases where it's allowed is if we know the child has some defect or some birth defect. Is that one of the cases where?
Yeah, not just birth defect, non-viability. So it's known in some chromosomal conditions, for example, that child could be born and breathe for a couple seconds, but it's not going to live more than a couple hours.
Or what if they know it's going to have some disease that's going to hinder the quality of life?
Yeah, that's different. That's a bioethics issue. That there's now that doesn't count. So that may be seen as a hardship for the parents to take care of, but that now is not a reason to have an abortion, right? Some other people will talk about rape. And if rape before 40 days, or if you take the opinion of 120 days, that was not the decision of the mother, and there's kalam about that.
What's the majority opinion, 120 or 40?
Before the science of embryology, of course, it was 120. After the science of embryology, most ulama now look at this in terms of 42, because they read this second hadith as a second way of interpreting this one. So, especially if if they are of any kind of scientific background themselves, it's really hard not to interpret it that way. Very difficult for me. I look at ultrasounds all the time, and I see a fetus with a heartbeat, everything at 40 days. It's hard for me to say that's a nutfa. It doesn't work, you know. But still, I mean, there's many ways to look at the Arabic language, and there's other possibilities of interpretation as well. Yeah. Any other points or questions or anything? Jazakallah khair. So the next hadith is hadith number 10. And this is another hadith that deals with issues of Iman, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this is from Abu Hurairah, he says sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Inna Allah tayyib la yaqbalu illa tayyiban. Allah is pure, and He doesn't accept other than that which is pure. And tayyib is an interesting term. We're going to come back to it. Let's just read the hadith here, and then we're going to come back to this term. وإن الله أمر المؤمنين بما أمر به المرسلين فقال الله تعالى يا أيها الرسل كلوا من الطيبات وعملوا صالحا. Allah has commanded the believers the same thing that He has commanded the messengers. And then an ayah of Quran is mentioned in Surah Mu'minun, ayah number 51. O messengers, eat what is good and do what is good. Or eat what is pure and you'll do what is good, right? You'll do what is salih, acceptable, right? Notice the connection between good food and good action, right? We're going to come back to this, right? وقال تعالى يا أيها الذين آمنوا كلوا من الطيبات ما رزقناكم. Again, the idea of eating tayyib food is emphasized. O you who believe, eat of the tayyib food that we have sustained you with. Then he mentions ثم ذكر الرجل يطيل السفر أشعث أغبر. Then he gave the example of a man who was on a long journey to the point at which dust has changed his hair a little bit, right? أشعث أغبر, his hair is disheveled, right? The idea here is to talk about someone who was either out in jihad or out for hajj or out, in some pious endeavor, because what then he says is يَمُدُّ يَدَيْهِ إِلَى السَّمَاءِ, and he's raising his hands up in dua, right? Ya Rab, saying, oh Allah this, oh Allah that. Like he's asking Allah for a couple things, right? He's asking Allah for different things. Then, وَمُطَعَمُهُ حَرَامٌ, right? وَمَشْرَبُهُ حَرَامٌ وَمَلْبَسُهُ حَرَامٌ. But his food, again, the idea of food and drink here is emphasized, is haram. His drink is haram. The clothes in which he's wearing is haram. وَغُذِيَ بِالْحَرَامِ. And the way in which he is sustained, right, is haram. فَأَنَا يُسْتَجَابُ لَهُ. So how is this person supposed to be answered in dua? So let's go back now to because the whole hadith revolves around the idea of tayyib, right? Allah, first of all, Allah is tayyib. Tayyib meaning pure, right? And therefore, because Allah is pure, He doesn't accept other than what is pure, right? And the idea of purity here is ikhlas in action, that your intention is solely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and it's not for anyone else, right? And the mukhlis is the one. Ikhlas is the process, literally in the Arabic language. If you have, let's say you have fluid, okay? Or let's say you have a bunch of different substances. And there's only one that you want in there, okay? There's only one type of fluid that you want in there. Ikhlas is the process of slowly removing everything else until just one thing remains. That's what ikhlas is. And this is actually talked about in the Quran and linguistic point. وَإِنَّ لَكُمْ فِي الْأَنْعَامِ لَعِبْرَةً, right? نُسْقِيكُمْ فِيمَا بُطُونٍ مِّن بَيْنِ فَرْثٍ وَدَمٍ لَبَنًا خَالِصًا سَائِغًا لِلشَّارِبِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Nahl that you have in cows an example, okay? What happens in cows is that everything in between the circulatory system, right? مِن بَيْنِ فَرْثٍ وَدَمٍ, right? And everything in between the digestive system, right? Between these two things, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you have labanan khalisan. Somehow, some way, milk that is khalis comes out. Like, look at the term, khalis, from ikhlas, right? Pure. The idea there is that somehow all of these impurities, because blood is impure, and everything in the digestive tract is impure. All of these have been removed bit by bit and purified bit by until only the pure thing comes out. Actions are similar to that. When we make an intention to do an action, right? There's all these other impure motives. I want to be seen. I want to show off, right? Let me have a reputation, right? Let me do this to get some kind of like clout here, right? Or something like that, right? Bria jumps in there, jah, all these different things. So all these things make our intention impure, right? And all of these different things, when we make muhasaba and muraqaba of ourselves, right? We check ourselves. We start to notice, wait a minute, I have a little bit of this impure intention here. Let me extract this and remove this. Let me remove that. Let me remove that until the only thing that remains is a pure intention for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the process of ikhlas, right? Right? And when you do that, shaitan has no power over you. Shaitan has no power, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions it specifically in the Quran, right? إِلَّا عِبَادَكَ مِنْهُمُ الْمُخْلَصِينَ. Shaitan says, I'm going to get all of them. I'm going to get all of them, except your servants that have ikhlas. Because they have nothing in which he can hold on to. Everything else has been removed. All these other bad intentions have been removed. So shaitan has no way to get to them, right? But other people who don't have ikhlas, they have objectives that go this way. They have objectives that go that way. They have intentions that have deviated this way and that way. Shaitan, those are all like ropes for shaitan. He can hold on to any one of those, right? And shaitan will get them, right? But only the ibad of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that have ikhlas, those are the ones that are free from the insinuations of shaitan. Not free from them, shaitan will always insinuate them, but shaitan will not have power over it. He will not have sultan. Sultan is power, right? Ability to do what you want. We know the other tradition that a person who is angry, shaitan plays with them like a child plays with a ball, right? And inna shaitan yajri min ibni adam majra dam. Right? Shaitan flows through some in the Quran, much more than we realize, right? For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَلْيَنْظُرِ الْإِنسَانُ إِلَى طَعَامِهِ. Right? Let mankind look at his food. Does that mean look at it like this? Nadar? No, nadar is look with contemplation, right? Like for example, Ibrahim in the Quran, فَنَظَرَ نَظْرَةً فِي النُّجُومِ. When he wanted to contemplate what to do with his people, these polytheists, the Quran in Surah Safat, it says he looked up at the stars. Nadara nadratan fi nujum, right? He's not just looking at the stars to look at the stars, he's contemplating. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَلْيَنْظُرِ الْإِنسَانُ إِلَى طَعَامِهِ. Let mankind contemplate about his food. أَنَّا صَبَبْنَا الْمَاءَ صَبًّا. Look how we sent down water from the sky. ثُمَّ شَقَقْنَا الْأَرْضَ شَقًّا. And we split forth the earth. فَأَنبَتْنَا فِيهَا حَبًّا. We bring out grains, وَعِنَبًا وَغَدْبًا, and all kinds of grapes and fodder for you and your cattle. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us the example of corn and how corn and charity are similar. So food as a way in which, to look at the idea of charity. One little grain of corn gives rise to 700, which gives rise to 700. That's how charity is, right? Food is talked about in a monopolization sense in the Quran, right? Surah Al-An'am. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَقَالُوا هَذِهِ أَنْعَامٌ وَحَرْثٌ حِجْرٌ لَا يَطْعَمُهَا إِلَّا مَنْ نَشَاءُ بِزَعْمِهِمْ, right? The Meccans, they used to have a monopoly over food. And they used to say, these are the types of cattle that people can eat from and then other people can't. These are the crops, harth, that some people can eat from and other people can't, right? And Allah says, مَا جَعَلَ اللَّهُ مِن بَحِيرَةٍ وَلَا سَائِبَةٍ وَلَا وَسِيلَةٍ وَلَا حَامٍ. 4 things. Have you heard this verse before? مَا جَعَلَ اللَّهُ مِن بَحِيرَةٍ وَلَا سَائِبَةٍ وَلَا وَسِيلَةٍ وَلَا حَامٍ. 4 things. Allah did not institute bahira, He did not institute sa'iba, wasila, or ham. These were superstitious practices that the Arabs had, in which they would say, oh, well, if a certain camel or something gives a certain number of births, then the men can use it, the women can't. Or if it gives a certain number of female births, then everyone can use it. Or if it's wasila, bahira was a camel that's ears were slit and it was marked for a certain thing, right? Monopolization over food, okay? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala condemns this significantly, right, in the Quran. And then food is talked about in a halal sense. Food is also talked about a lot as tayyib, eating what is tayyib, right? So food is talked, we know what halal is, right? Halal is that the throat is slit, blood is drained, right? The name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioned, And that has to be a certain type of animal. Can't be a predatory animal, can't be pig, can't so on and so forth. But then what is tayyib? Now if you look at the interpretations of tafsir, like you look at Tabari, right, or or you look at Ibn Kathir or some of the more classical interpretations of tafsir, tayyib is that the taste is good. That's a lot of what they say. It's pure and that the taste is good. So it's not rotten. Okay, that's the idea of tayyib, right? But nowadays, when people look at this verse and they look at agribusiness and the agribusiness industry, it's almost as if the definition or the meaning of tayyib is very different now, okay? Because now we're dealing with other things. We're dealing with things like GMOs, genetically modified organisms, right? You have companies like Monsanto that change the genes. They actually change the genes of corn and wheat and all these different plants, right? So it doesn't succumb to bacteria or to their own chemicals like Roundup, or bugs don't eat it. Like the bug refuses to eat the corn, but we still eat it, right? So what does that do to the definition of tayyib? Okay, then you have animals and the way animals are treated in these concentrated animal factory outlets. Like we heard of these CAFO farms, okay? This is how 90% of meat is produced in this country. Even the halal meat that we get is produced in what are called concentrated animal factory outlets. Let me tell you about how these concentrated animal factory outlets work, okay? You will have cows in rows in a bin, hundreds of cows in rows in a bin. They're not allowed to move, right? They're not allowed to go out into pasture, right? Like Allah says in the Quran, وَلَكُمْ فِيهَا جَمَالٌ حِينَ تُرِيحُونَ وَحِينَ تَسْرَحُونَ. You have in your cattle a beautiful sight when they come back home and when they go out in the mornings, right? I.e. this natural lifestyle a cow is supposed to have when it goes out and has its kind of natural eating and walking around and everything. Not so much now. In these concentrated animal factories, they stand and eat and do nothing but eat, right? What do they eat? They eat corn. Genetically modified corn, okay? The corn is not natural for their diet, so they get ulcers, okay? Not only that, they don't move, so they're ankle high in their own feces. So they get septic very fast, okay? The corn gives them stomach ulcers because they're supposed to be eating grass. So they get stomach ulcers, they get septic, they're living in their own feces. That's why 70% of antibiotics in America go to cows. 30% go to humans. 70% go to cows, right? 30% go to humans. They inject them with growth hormones to make them grow very fast. Same thing with chickens. Exact same thing, right? They get so big so fast. One of the biggest problems of growing chicken is that their ankles break because they get so big so fast they can't hold up their own weight. And then on top of this, how are these animals treated? They are constantly abused. They're flogged, they're whipped, they're yelled at, they're cursed, okay? What do you think that does to the animal? And then what do you think that does when we consume it, right? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam one time prohibited the cursing of a camel, right? He was in Medina, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they were riding with camel, and there was a woman, right? And she was on a camel. And فَضَرَبَتْ, the hadith says, the camel got a little bit rowdy, right? فَلَعَنَتْهَا, this woman who was on the camel cursed the camel, okay? Just cursed the camel, that's it, okay? فَقَالَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم خُذُوا مَا عَلَيْهَا وَدَعُوهَا فَإِنَّهَا مَلْعُونَةٌ. Take whatever's on the camel, then leave it, get off of it, for it's been cursed. He said that about the camel, i.e. simply speaking to it in a bad way, like cursing it. Somehow an energy has been transferred now to that camel, which makes it not safe to use. What about consumption? These cattle are yelled at and cursed all day, right? In these concentrated animal factory outlets, right? What about animal feelings, right? One time Rasulullah ﷺ was walking by a man sharpening his sword or sharpening his knife about to slaughter a goat, except that he had his foot on the goat's neck. Okay, and the goat was looking up at him, and he was sharpening his sword. And the Prophet ﷺ walked by him and saw this. And you know what he says? He says, "Aturidu an tamuta mawtatayn." Authentic hadith. Do you want to kill this goat twice? Do Do you want to kill it twice? I.e., you're killing it right now because it's so afraid. You're sharpening your sword in front of it. It knows what's about to happen, right? I.e., he's acknowledging animal feelings. All of this falls under the umbrella definition of tayyib, because we said tayyib is what? Pure. Pure, right? So what then does this do? If you modify the genetics, if you change the, because that's what Shaitan said he wants to do. فَلَا يُغَيِّرُونَ خَلْقَ اللَّهِ, right? They will change the creation of Allah, right? When you change the genetics, you change the natural growth pattern, you change the natural diet, okay? You abuse it, you yell at it, you kick it, you stomp it, you do all these different things, and then you cut the throat and you say Bismillah, and you're like halal, right? That's fine, it's halal. There's no question that it's halal, but is it tayyib, right? And so now, a different type of mentality I think Muslims have to have towards food, right? Because this is very important. Allah says, if you eat what's tayyib, you'll do what's good, okay? So, by deduction, not eating what's tayyib will cause us to do, or it'll be easier to do what's bad, right? Here's another example, high fructose corn syrup, all right? You ever wonder why it's so hard to stop eating? You know that little advertisement, what is it, Lay's potato chips? I bet you can't, what is it? I bet you can't eat
Just one?
just one. They're right, because there's high fructose corn syrup. They know what they're doing, okay? And if you look at what high fructose corn syrup is, it's not tayyib. It's definitely not natural, okay? It's fructose, a natural sugar, which has been fractionated in a way that increases the sweetness of it. Now, your brain is developed in a certain way to when sweetness hits your tongue, it's programmed to swallow. That's why baby formulas and baby medicines always have added sugar, because it helps the baby swallow. Okay, it's a reflex. And then you have a natural reflex from your stomach, a signal that goes back from your stomach. As it gets big, it goes to your brain, says stop swallowing. It's a balance. This is why we don't overeat, okay? But what happens when the signal that says swallow is stronger than the signal that comes back from the stomach that says stop eating, right? It's hard to stop. At that point, your brain is being tricked, okay? Like the stimulation and the desire, like the dopamine release that you get, the feel-good release that you get to swallow and to have another bite is more than what your brain has been programmed to be able to handle in a balanced way, okay? So if you look at McDonald's, for example, a number one meal at McDonald's, okay? The bread has high fructose corn syrup. The meat has high fructose corn syrup. The drink has high fructose corn syrup. The fries have high fructose corn syrup. There's 1,500 calories in that meal. You eat that number one meal at McDonald's, you still feel hungry, right? And it's like, what the heck? You just had enough calories for the whole day. How is that possible, right? It's possible because this is not tayyib food. Even if it's halal McDonald's in Mecca, which is another problem, okay? Even if it's halal McDonald's in Mecca, it's not tayyib, right? Your body is not naturally designed to eat this way, okay? And we could go on and on and on about this. There's so much I could say about this. This is a subject I'm very interested in, especially agribusiness and tayyib food. But the bottom line is we have to think more broadly, more ethically, right? And we have to be more intelligent about our food choices, more conscious about our food choices. If you can't pronounce the ingredients on the back of a label, right? And if most of what's on there is foreign to you, it might not be a good idea, right? You know, bread is 4 ingredients: yeast, water, salt, and flour. You know, if you buy a loaf of bread and there's 80 ingredients on the back of it, that's a problem. That's a problem. You know, some of them have numbers and letters mixed into the, and that's a problem. You know, one thing you can try, this will freak you out, actually. The next time you have a package of food that comes in a package, I guarantee you, 90% of the time it'll have something called natural flavors, okay? So, what are natural flavors? Why don't you try something? There's an 800 number on that package. Call them and ask them, hey, I'm just curious, what's in these natural flavors? every single time the person on that phone will tell you that's proprietary information. We don't have to tell you. So they don't even have to tell you what they're putting into your body. It could be camel urine for all you know, right? As long as it's not made in a lab, it's natural flavors. You know, and the FDA does not regulate this like you think they do, right? So we have to be more conscious as Muslims. It can get a little bit difficult, but that's about tayyib food. And then the next part we'll end with this is about dua and the relationship between food and dua, right? And a man who looks like he's very disheveled from constant worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but his dua is not being answered because the food is haram, the drink is haram, the clothing is haram, the income is haram. So clearly from this we can deduce that haram food and haram income and haram clothes cause our dua not to be answered. Back to our example about dua, Ibn Qayyim, he says that making dua is like shooting an arrow. Okay? There's two components to shooting the arrow. Okay? One is the strength of the archer, and number two is the aim. Right? The aim. Okay? He says the strength of the archer is like the Iman of the person making dua. And the more pure their Iman is and the less sins they have, the stronger the archer. Right? So the further the arrow will go. But there's also the aim. The aim is how you make dua. Right? The aim is, you look at the du'as of Rasulullah, they're so beautiful, they're so humble. There's so much adab in the dua. And this is another important part of dua. You know, one of the ways I like to kind of explain this about the adab of dua is that there's a right time, a right mind. There's a right time, a right rhyme, and a right state of mind. Right? So yeah, right time, right rhyme, and a right state of mind. And this is all of the adab of dua is encompassed in this, right? So there's awqat al-istijaba. There's certain times that dua will be answered. When it rains, okay? An hour on Friday, the last third of the night, right? The times of tahajjud, right? These are certain times in which safar, if you're on a journey, okay? Dua is most likely to be answered. And then the right rhyme, okay? It's from the adab of dua that you come into the dua humble. Like the dua of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He would make, Allahumma anta rabbi la ilaha illa. Oh Allah, you are my Lord. There is no God but you. Khalaqtani wa na'abduk. Wa ana la ahdika wa wa'adika mastata. You created me. I am your servant. I am on your covenant to the best of my ability. Look how humble this is. He doesn't just come in and say, can I have this, can I have that? Can I have this, can I have that? Right? There's an adab, right? There's a right rhyme. Okay? أعوذ بك من شر ما صنعت. I seek refuge in you from the evil that I have done. أبوء لك بنعمتك علي وأبوء بذنبي. I confess the blessings that you have bestowed upon me, and I confess my shortcomings before me. فاغفر لي فإنه لا يغفر الذنوب إلا أنت. So forgive me, so there's no one who can forgive sins but you. You see, that's the right rhyme. You know, there's adab in that. There's humility in that. There's confession.